out there. Of you have asked the questions and you've always been asking, Lebu, we want to know more about transportation of dangerous goods. So we are joined again this afternoon by Richard. Richard, where are you? I don't see your face there. Richard, thank you so much for joining us again for this live session. Listen, I always look forward to this discussion with yourself, by the way. Hey.
Thanks, Lebu.
Everyone thinks that the movement of transportation goods is the toughest ever. And I always remind them that if you know the regulations, you know legislation, you know exactly what is needed in the industry, that can really help you. You know, as a transporter out there, I know a lot of people that are joining us on Instagram are professionals. And I really want to hear from your side as professionals out there that are in the industry. You probably want to move into a gas organization like an Afrox, an organization like an EasyGas, and a whole lot of other gas companies out there. And you're probably asking yourself that shifting my role in this logistics environment, moving to another industry, what is it that I know about gas? Out there, if you are an entrepreneur, you want to start moving your gas products or your dangerous goods, you're already asking yourself, how do I transition into this industry? Let me tell you, we have the most experienced person in the industry that I know called Richard Durand, and he's taking us every 2 weeks on these sessions of dangerous goods. Richard, welcome again. Thank you for joining us. Today we're talking about gas. So guys, please tell me, what do you want to know about gas products? I want to hear your chats through the chat box, who you are, where you are coming from, what is it that you want to know with regards to this commodity that we are talking about. Our first session spoke to a lot around legislation, about the regulations, around the bylaws as well, around dangerous goods. Now we are deep diving into different commodities. If you are there on LinkedIn, please send your notes, send your questions. What is it that you want to know about gas products? Richard, a special welcome again. I think we can kick off with our session. Thank you.
Thank you, Lebu. I think what my session today is going to be very much around gas. Let me just get my presentation up and get it full screen. There we go. So I'm not going to go into a great amount of detail around the let's call it the legislation. We spent a lot of time doing that last week. I'm going to talk more about the different modes of transport, and Lebu said how to get into it. Yes, some of the barriers to entry, I'm going to touch on those, but also some of the hazards. Gas is not something to be played around with. It is the second or third to explosives. It is probably one of the most hazardous products that are transported by road. So I'm going to just show you explain to you some of the hazards and some of the precautions that need to be taken and why the equipment is designed as it is. And but please, if there are any questions, I'm happy to share or happy to answer questions, share whatever knowledge I've got. If I haven't got the answers, I can find out. So to kick off, transport of dangerous goods by road, we're talking gases. And last week or 2 weeks ago, we spoke about the last session. They're known as the class 2 in the 9 classes of dangerous goods. And for those of you that perhaps were not on the last session, those are my contact details at the bottom of the slide. And Lebu, I'm sure, can share them with you offline if necessary. So those are what we call the diamonds, the warning diamonds. I'll go into a little bit more detail now, but you'll see at the bottom of each diamond is a 2, the number 2. That indicates that it's a class 2, And each diamond talks about a gas. There's a bottom right, there's a red triangle, red diamond with flammable gas. Next to it, compressed gas, a green diamond with compressed gas. Top right, a green diamond with non-flammable compressed gas. And then to the left of that, a white diamond with toxic gas. And I'll go explain a little bit more what these mean. So gases are a class 2, and there are 3 subclasses. Flammable gas, so the red diamond that we showed you, it's still marked as a class 2 on the diamond, but let's call it in the documentation, it's classed as a 2.1, which is your flammable gases, which are probably your most common. The most common, and I will be talking quite a lot about it, is your LPG, a liquid petroleum gas. A lot of us are using LPG in our homes these days for cooking, because Eskom has been letting us down a bit, so we're reverting to flammable gas, to LPG. Properly controlled, properly managed, in the correct equipment, it is a very, very efficient way of heating and reasonably cost effective. But in the wrong situation, it can be disastrous. And we'll look at that a bit more now. 2.2 is your non-flammable or non-toxic gases. These are more your medical gases. So things like nitrogen and various products that you might be using in the hospitals, oxygen, those are all non-flammable, non-toxic gases. So really a lot around medicinal use, medical facilities, etc. And then the third one, is toxic gas. And one that comes to my mind immediately is things like chlorine gas. So most of the water that we drink in South Africa they use chlorine gas to purify that water. And that chlorine gas is highly toxic. So we drink it, but it's very small quantities that are going into the water. But sometimes you can actually taste the chlorine in the water. That is the chlorine that's been introduced in the way of a gas. Those of you that might have a swimming pool, chlorine, or H2H as it's known, is a granular form of chlorine that is added to your swimming pool to keep it nice and clean. But in a gas form, and if you smell that when you open the container, you can smell the strong smell. There's not a gas there, that's just the little bit of the vapor that's coming off the crystals. But in a gas form, it is very toxic. So the gases themselves have certain dangers, some of them. The other danger is that they are under extreme pressure. So that is where the danger is amplified, because that pressure, or that release of pressure, uncontrolled release of pressure, is what is going to cause the secondary issue. So you might have a flammable gas that's under pressure and you have a leak. You've got a fire and you've got that leak, which hopefully my video will work a bit later, but I can show you the consequences of that. So at the bottom of my slide, we talk about liquefied petroleum gas, LPG. There's liquefied natural gas now. Natural gas is becoming quite popular. Lots of natural gas finds, and then the technology is now enabling the use of natural gas to be used in place of the liquefied petroleum gas. Both liquefied, both gas. One is from a natural source. The petroleum LPG comes out of the petroleum industry. So, for example, the Sasol is a gas pipeline from Mozambique that comes all the way to Secunda, which is run by Sasol. That is liquefied natural gas. And they are now using that liquefied natural gas in the production of chemicals and fuels at Secunda. So instead of using coal as the source product, they're using the liquefied natural gas. It's cleaner burning, it's easier to handle, but it's still hazardous. And then there's the compressed natural gas, which is when you take the liquefied gas and you compress it you put it into a container, you compress it for use in motor vehicles and other activities such as that. So those are just some of the different types of gases. I mentioned this at the last session. These are variations on the diamonds. You'll see on the left-hand side of the slide, the 2.1, 2.2, 2.3. Across the top, you'll notice there's the international hazard class diamond, and then the alternative hazard class diamond. The only difference is that there is no writing, there's no lettering, there's no description on the international hazard class diamonds. So and I'm going to say Europe, in Europe, the UK, they are using the international diamonds without the lettering. And in Southern Africa, we can use the ones on the left of the screen, but tending to use more the ones on the right, which have a description on them. What's the product? And from a fire or emergency services point of view, it's easier for them to identify what they got to contend with when they can see the pictogram, the flame or the cylinder, or the skull and crossbones if we get down to the toxic gas, as opposed to just the skull and crossbones. So that's just again, just a bit of a summary. As I say, we touched on it last time, but that's just a bit of a repeat. So gases, modes of transport. As Lebo said, everybody thinks getting into transport of gas is very lucrative. That's something we want to get into. But as I said earlier, there are a number of pitfalls that we need to be aware of. So really, the main modes by road are your bulk tankers, and I'll show you some diagrams, some pictures just now. That is your traditional bulk gas tanker. Then multiple element gas containers. We don't see these too often in South Africa, but they are multimodal type gas containers that can be taken off, put on a ship, off from a ship onto a train, from a train onto the road. But it is another form of transport. And then there are the traditional cylinders that we probably see quite often, being transported around a lot, or transported around on small, what we call in South Africa, bakkies, small vehicles. Those are the sort of cylinders that we tend to use in our homes or restaurants. And then there's also a mini bulk, which is a mix between a bulk tank and a cylinder. So it's known as mini bulk, and that's used more in fixed installations like restaurants or factories and that type of thing, where they don't want to put in a big bulk container. They can put in a series of mini bulks. So that is a picture of a bulk gas tanker. I've said it's an imported tanker. This colleague, an associate of mine, is actually bringing these tankers into South Africa. They are built in Europe and finished off in Brussels or in Belgium. Extremely high quality finish, and we may see one or two of these running in the not too distant future. So you'll notice I'll show you the next picture, but the dome, the front portion of it is a very smooth finish. That is a South African constructed one. You'll see the front dome's not quite as smooth. It's made up of a number of sections. Both of them work. This particular tanker is built by Tank Clinic in Alberton. They have an agreement with a company that actually builds the tankers. So they don't build the vessel. That vessel is built, and then it is taken by Tank Clinic and then put onto the vehicle, onto the trailer, onto the axles. And then Tank Clinic, it's sold as a Tank Clinic tanker, but it is it's two manufacturers build the equipment, and Tank Clinic puts it all together into the vehicle. Also very good quality. Cost-wise, probably a little bit cheaper than the imports. I don't know offhand what the costs are, but this vessel is designed as a high pressure. It's a pressure vessel, and it's built from, I think these are 12 or 15 millimeter thick steel, and they can hold up to, I think it's 2000 something kPa, kilopascals. So very, very high pressure. All the pipe work is designed to operate at very high pressure. So it is really, really a work of art and a work of engineering. So if we go into a little bit of detail on the gas road tankers, very high initial cost and very high maintenance cost. Because of the high risk, as I said, it's built as a pressure vessel, and it has to be recertified. There has to be a full recertification inspection every 36 months by an AIA, an approved inspection authority. To do that inspection, the tanker has to be basically stripped of all its components, all the valves, fittings, everything gets stripped off. The tanker must be purged, must make sure all the gas is out of the tanker. So they do that by flaring the tanker, by burning the gas out. The welds are x-rayed. The tanker shell is thickness tested. The valves are overhauled and tested. All the pressure gauges are recalibrated. The hoses are pressure tested. So it is a lot of work. It takes, I think, about 3 weeks to get a tanker done. So you can, imagine the cost that goes with it. And then once it's done and it's been approved, it's got to be, as I say, approved by the approved inspection authority. It is then given a book of life. It's about a 15-page document, the report that goes with that to say what was checked, what was found, what was in place, etc., what was repaired. So it's really a book of life that goes with that tanker. And that book of life lives with that tanker. So if a tanker is sold and you are buying a used tanker, you must ask for a book of life for that tanker, or at least the pressure test certificate, but hopefully they can give you the book of life as well. But the last bullet point I've got there is a well-maintained tanker can provide you with many, many years of good service. So it's a high initial cost, but if you look after it and make sure it's well maintained, it can last for many, many years. I think there's tankers out there that are 20, 25 years old that are still running. The only reason that some of them are not being used, I'm going to say, by some of the major operators, is that over time the material has got lighter. They've managed to keep the weight of the tankers down so they can increase the volume, and by increasing the volume they can carry more product. So some of the likes of Tanker Services and Unitrans and these sort of the big transport companies have over time been selling off some of their older equipment because they're replacing it with newer newer, more modern equipment, but there's nothing wrong with the old equipment other than it's not quite as payload efficient. Are there any questions? So that's just about a general gas tanker. Any particular questions, Lebo, that you might have?
Yeah, I was just checking if there's any other questions coming either on LinkedIn or Facebook or from everyone that has logged in on Zoom. I haven't seen any, but very important. I like what you're saying, Richard, with regards to the Book of Life. I mean, it shows already how critical it is when you're talking about these tankers that because of the safety requirements, because you're moving dangerous goods as well, that is very critical that there is a track record. It's like a maintenance process that you really want to see that what you are buying, even if you're buying a second-hand tanker, that we have to really acknowledge and make sure that we understand what the tanker has gone through in terms of the process, and that you cannot even take any shortcuts as part of the process. I think that's one of the important aspects that we must always remember. But one of the things that I think for the purpose of everyone that is logging in and also learning for the first time, because I realized that some of those that are joining, they're already in trucking, but they do not understand, or in logistics, the context of gas and the tankers itself. Tell me, in terms of in terms of the length, so that people understand. I mean, you look at this long bullet, it's more of a bullet tanker kind of. Does it come on the same size? Do you carry the same quantities? Because, when you start thinking of payloads and you start thinking also around the trucking business, I've also looked at the basis that they will always look at fixed cost in terms of the industry like that, because of the variation in terms of the seasonality as well. So maybe if you can just touch a bit of that, Richard, that will really help as well those that are thinking of going into that industry. Thank you.
So a very good question. Thanks, Lebo. You can get them smaller. You can get a small rigid tanker. It depends on what operation you want to go into. So if you're going to be delivering to some of the, and I live near Northcliffe, and the Cresta shopping centre is down the road from us. And they've got a bulk gas tank in the premises of the centre, which I'm assuming feeds the restaurants, etc. So when you're delivering to a big gas tank like that, which is probably a 23,000 cubic meter, then a big tanker would probably be the best bet, most cost effective. But if you're delivering to a smaller complex where you can't get a big tanker in like that, then rather you get a small tanker. So it depends on the operation. And yes, the capital outlay is going to be considerably different from one to the other, but you've got to weigh up, as you said, your payload. If you're going to be running from Durban to Johannesburg, you want to run the biggest payload that you can. But if you're doing local deliveries, you want to have a more flexible tanker. Indeed. So I've got a client, in fact, in Zimbabwe, who imports gas from South Africa. They've got 3 bridging tankers, which they run the gas into Zimbabwe, and then they've got 2 smaller vehicles, which they then do the distribution within Zimbabwe. So it's that type of, depending on what your operation is.
Okay. Thank you, Richard. Colleagues, if you have any questions, like I said, please make sure that you put those questions across on the chat box. If you're on LinkedIn and on Facebook, we are keeping on checking all those questions around the gas road tankers. We are talking, for those that has just joined us, we are talking about transportation of gas products. And right now, we are heading on to the gas road tankers that we've been discussing with Richard. Please, any questions, send them through or start making some notes, because when we finish off here, we will be now taking all the questions, then you can ask us directly. Thank you, Richard. You can proceed.
Thank you, Lebo. So the next type of gas tanker is what we call a cryogenic tanker. These are very much around specialist gases, medical gases. I think Lebo mentioned, or Rose mentioned earlier, about Afrox. Just by chance, we've got Afrox tankers on display. These tankers, you probably can't see it, but these tankers are insulated. If we go back, you can see this tanker that's on the screen now. That is the bare metal of the tanker. You can see the welds across on the nose of the bullet. So that is not transporting under low temperature. It's transporting under high pressure, but not at low temperature. Where these ones are actually have got a similar vessel inside the cladding, but they have got an insulated exterior, insulated with a fiberglass type material, because some of these materials or gases that are transported in these tankers are at minus 150 degrees centigrade and more. So things like nitrogen, I think I've got a list of some of them. So yeah, if we, your cryogenic means that it's running at a very, very low temperature. So the cryogenic liquefied gases are also known as refrigerated liquefied gases, and are commonly called cryogenic liquids. So the colder it gets, depending on the product, it then turns into a liquid. But as soon as you start releasing the pressure and the temperature, it then turns back into a gas. And then, yeah, cryogenic gases are cryogenic liquids that have been vaporized and may still be at a very low temperature. Cryogenic liquids are used for their low temperature properties, or to allow other larger quantities to be stored or transported. So the cryogenic liquid can be used as a refrigerant as well. They are extremely cold with boiling points below 150 degrees. So they will boil at minus 150 degrees. So extremely, extremely cold. Some examples are carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, both which have boiling points, which have higher boiling points, are sometimes included in this category. I must say up front, I'm not a cryogenic expert. It is a very specialized field. Afrox, Pure Gas, Air Liquide, these sort of companies are transporting cryogenic gases. It's just an example of a different type of gas and a different type, similar tanker, but different. Sorry, I'm just, what's happened now? Okay. This is what I mentioned earlier, the multiple element gas container, or the MEGC. You'll see that it is, the frame is the size, is an international ISO container size, and then it has the multiple tubes inside it, which are interlinked with each other. So they all link together to make up a larger volume. And these are, as I said earlier, transported a lot by ship, and can be multimodal, taken off ships, onto trains, onto vehicles. You don't see a lot of these in South Africa. Again, very specialist gases. So gases probably which are imported for a specific use, but I don't know of anybody that transports or that distributes their gas using these type of containers. But you'll see that within each bullet is a very strong container. Each bullet is, and then they are subsequently within a reinforced framework, also to protect those to protect the bullets. So if there is an accident or whatever, hopefully nothing will get punctured. But yeah, there is no guarantee in this life, unfortunately. So one of the most, as I mentioned earlier, one of the most popular gases that we most of us have had some dealings with is what is liquefied petroleum gas, LPG, which has the United Nations number of 1075. And LPG is a mixture between butane and propane. Both of them are flammable gases. And I'm not a chemist, but they mix them depending on the qualities of the propane and butane and propane, and together they mix together into liquefied petroleum gas. And where some of the dangers of LPG and of a lot of these gases are that the vapors are heavier than air, and it'll spread along the ground and collect in low confined areas. So if there is an LPG leak, you can't see LPG. It's clear. You can't see it. You can smell it, but I'll touch on that just now. The vapors will drop onto the ground, and they will flow along the ground and go into drains and low areas. So one of I'm going to call it a spin-off from this, is that if you want a LPG installation done in your home, you've decided you now want to put in an LPG stove, and you're going to have one or two LPG cylinders. The positioning of those cylinders is critical, because they are not allowed to be closer than, I think, 6 meters from a drain, like an open water drain. And that installation has to be done by a qualified installer. You can't just do it yourself. You can't get your friend who's quite a handy person to come in and do it. It has to be done by a qualified installer, again, because of the dangers. So the vapor now spreads along the ground. You don't know where it's spreading. You can't see it. But if it finds a source of ignition, if there's somebody smoking or there happens to be a spark that ignites that gas, it will then flash back to where the leak came from. So you think it's all clear, the gas is gone. If you've got a gas stove and you turn it on and it takes you a few seconds to light it, often you'll see there's quite a flash as it ignites. That is the vapor flashing back to the source of ignition. So again, the main danger with this is that you can't see it. The other danger is containers may explode when heated. So if there is a fire, if something happens and a container overheats, it can explode. The cylinders, so we'll talk about cylinders just now. The cylinders similar to what we would use in our homes, if they rupture, which is very often if the valve on the top of the cylinder is broken off or damaged, the pressure of the gas inside the cylinder and forcing its way out of that small rupture hole will cause it to rocket. It will start shooting around like a rocket and can be very, very dangerous. You said before, it's highly flammable and it's commonly used in heating and cooking, as we've said. So under the right circumstances, under the right equipment, correct maintenance, it is extremely useful and, as I said, heat effective and cost effective product. But under the wrong conditions, it's treacherous. So gas cylinder transport. This is probably the easiest way of getting into gas transport is to start off transporting some gas cylinders. This is not a South African picture. I couldn't find any decent pictures. This, I think, comes from India or somewhere like that. But the way that they're transporting it is very effective and very safe. You'll notice they've got the cylinders are standing on wooden, it looks like wooden pallets. So they're not standing on the bare metal, which is also good, so that they're not metal on metal can create friction, can create heat, can create a spark. I see the couple in the front are, but the bulk of them are not. The cylinders are not standing on top of each other. They're not cylinder on cylinder. They've got a, I'm going to call it a shelf between the cylinders, and the next set of cylinders is on top of them. I think looking at these particular ones, they don't have any protection on the valves. So that's maybe why they're stacked like this. But this is a good example. There's no placarding on this vehicle. As we discussed at the last session, each vehicle must have placards on showing that it's carrying LPG with a UN 1075 number on it, etc., etc. But that's quite a good example of smaller gas cylinders being transported. That's an example of the bigger, the more sort of industrial size gas cylinders, much taller, not as stable. These ones have got quite a wide base, whereas the industrial ones are much taller and not that stable. And you'll see that they are transported in cages to keep them upright, stop them rattling against each other. And within those cages, they're normally tied as well. They're normally strapped. So this is, if you're on the road and you see an Afrox type bigger vehicle, you'll see that this is how they've been transported as well. Upright position, well secured, and that's really, there's only one way to transport them, and that is correctly. And I think we'll get to, this is an example of how I see you shouldn't be transporting cylinders, but this man's got quite a clever little cart that he's got transporting cylinders, some of them hanging on all over the place. But I don't know, I wouldn't say that's very safe to deal with it, to handle your cylinders like that. But these things happen throughout the world. These are the mini bulk cylinders, examples of the mini bulk cylinders. So this is a factory installation. I'm not sure of the actual capacity of each one, but I think they're about 750 kilograms or 1,000 kilograms each of the material, the product inside. And then they are attached to a manifold, and so you can replace one or two as you go along without having to shut down your whole plant. You can close off a valve, replace one, open it up again, and start feeding back into your manifold. These are not that popular in South Africa. They are used in some restaurant installations that I've seen, but it's more in an industrial and type use. But again, you'll see on these, they've got a foot, they've got a ring around the foot, around the base, which keeps the tank off the ground. And it's got a protection ring around the top, where the pipe couples into the cylinder. That is the valve itself is below that protection ring to, again, protect it from being knocked off. And I see these ones have got a lid that you can close over as well for further protection. So a very neat installation. So if you are interested in getting into LPG, some of the background to LPG in South Africa, the availability. There are 6 fuel refineries in South Africa, of which 5 of them produce LPG. So there's a refinery in Cape Town, 2 in Durban, 1 in Secunda, 1 in Sasolburg. The only one that doesn't produce LPG is the Natref refinery in Sasolburg. Otherwise, all the other 5 produce LPG in various quantities. So the article that I found says that those 5 refineries produce about 80% of the LPG consumed in South Africa, while the remainder is imported to compensate for the shortfall. My personal opinion is in fact the local refineries are not producing that much LPG anymore, and it's going to become more difficult because the NGen refinery in Durban, or NREF as they call it, is going to stop being a refinery. It's going to just be a storage facility for imported fuel. So they may be importing LPG as well. The old Caltex refinery in Cape Town, which is no longer Caltex, I can't think of the new owners. There's talk that they may stop producing fuel as well. And so more and more LPG is going to be imported into South Africa. And one of the reasons why these refineries are stopping producing fuel is the quality of our fuel in South Africa is lower than, I'm going to say, most first world countries. And to upgrade our refineries to meet the environmental requirements is not cost effective. So, as I said, quite a few of them are going to start phasing out production and just be storage facilities. So currently, the third bullet point is a company called Petrodec, which is the holding company, or Petrogas, which is the gas division, which is a UK company. Petrogas imports LPG through Richards Bay into a big terminal that's been built by Bidvest Tank Terminals in Richards Bay. They extended that refinery about 2 years ago, I think it was. They, I think, tripled the size of not the refinery, the storage facility. And they are importing gas. They bring it in ships. They pump it across into the tank storage facility, and then you can go and load your gas tanker at Richards Bay. Some of the others, and I'm not sure where they all get the gas from, Oryx, EasyGas, Afrox, are purchasing LPG and marketing LPG. Afrox is, I think they also produce some of their own LPG. HandyGas is their brand, very well-known brand. HandyGas has almost become a generic name for LPG. Afrox is the largest wholesaler and distributor of LPG in South Africa, that they distribute under their own brand, under their own name. EasyGas is owned by a European company. Oryx is also a European company. So they are wholesalers and distributors of LPG in South Africa. Then there's a very successful company, you may be aware of them, Wiser Gas. They're situated in Kaya Sands in Johannesburg. A black woman-owned distributor of gas, has done very well. And if you want to get into the gas business, suggest you go and talk to the owner of Wiser Gas. She can tell you some of the pros and cons of it, because she's had lots of experience. I, in fact, as a SKS auditor, audit her operations, so I know the operation very well and is very well run. Sasol Secunda are an inland supplier. They're the only refinery inland. All the other refineries on the coast. Sasol Secunda are an inland manufacturer and supplier of LPG. So for Gauteng, it's a nice close facility to load at. The downside is that they have limited volumes of gas. So everybody wants to buy their gas and understand a very good quality gas as well, but don't always have available. There are always shortages of LPG in winter. It's one of those things that, we have warm summers and relatively cold winters. So in winter, everybody wants LPG for their heaters, etc., etc. So, and that's one of the reasons why there's a, increase in imports of gas into South Africa, because the local refineries can't produce enough. The last point, which I've highlighted, allocations. The allocations are very tightly held by the majors. So whatever gas is available is sorry, I've got a dog outside that's just hold it. I'll be with you now, please. Ellen, dog's barking outside my office. Puppy.
All right, guys, any questions from your side whilst Richard is taking care of the duck issue? If you've got any questions from your side, please make sure that you put them across on the chat box. Very interesting, Richard. I was running a poll just now, just to get an assessment of what everyone's feel is with regards to the to the industry. And I asked the question that do they find the industry to be simple? Is it intimidating? And the response that I got to everyone is that, and I will tell you how many people responded to this, because I just took a picture on the responses from everyone. So what everyone is saying is that we had 18 out of 24 people that has just responded. Obviously, we have 28 here. This doesn't go on to the people that are on Facebook and on LinkedIn. But I asked the question that if they find the industry to be intimidating. And interesting enough, 61% is saying yes. And then 39% is saying no. So what is your view, everyone on LinkedIn? Do you find the industry to be intimidating, going into it and listening to the abundance of knowledge, the abundance of knowledge that is coming from Richard? Is it easily accessible? Do you think you can do it? As a professional out there, do you think you can venture and work in an industry like that? An entrepreneur out there, are you thinking of expanding your business, or you think like, I'm not getting into it? So very interesting response, Richard.
Very. But I think that, I'm not surprised, because that's the message I'm putting across. It's not an easy industry. It's high capital, high barriers to entry. And the last point that I was just touched on, apologies, we got a young puppy that's a bit of a nuisance at the moment, but allocations are tightly held. So if you want to go get into gas, LPG, you buy a tanker, etc. Now you say, well, where do I get gas from? And you approach Sasol, they're going to say to you, and this is first-hand information, sorry, we don't have any spare allocation. So you want to go to any of the others, their allocations are very, very tightly held by the majors and some of the mid-sized operators. And Waza Gas is one of them that has seen a gap in the market and holds quite a large allocation. So you can buy gas from Waza Gas, but you're probably going to pay a bit of a premium for it, because she's got the market advantage. But if you want to get in, that's perhaps an area to talk to. Don't try and go straight to Sasol or somebody like that, because you're not going to get anywhere. Doesn't matter. I've got a young man, got all the BE credentials that Sasol require, And I've been to Sasol twice with him, and we cannot get an allocation for him. He's got his own tanker. He drives his own tanker, very professional. He's got his SQAS accreditation, but he cannot get his own allocation because he's just too small. So you've got to weigh it up, and I said to them, you're discriminating against the small operators. And they said, sorry, that's the way it is. So, and yeah, so just be aware that don't go and spend lots of money buying equipment until you know you've got some allocation and you've got some clients.
Oh, yes.
So what I've noticed in the market now is some of the operators that have been selling gas in small containers to end users. They've had to rely on somebody to deliver their gas to them. So they might have a small facility which has to be approved by the fire departments, et cetera, but they've been battling to get those deliveries. So they've gone out and bought a used tanker, which they just use to top up their own static tanks so that they can deliver to their clients. So there's different models. You don't have to have the biggest and the best tanker to get into the business, but there are different models to look at.
Indeed.
Okay.
Maybe two things from my side, Richard. Quickly, you were asking what the new company is, because Caltex, in terms of the name, is not existing. Colleagues, is called Astron Energy. So
Astron.
Don't be surprised one day you go past, a filling station is called Astron Energy. It's the old Caltex that you remember, so you can always check them. So that's what Richard was talking about. And that's the first thing. And Richard, also, I think it's important that everyone that has joined in to understand what this SCOSH audit requirement is in terms of the safety and quality assessment sustainability. All I can tell you is that you want to do business with these chemical businesses and so forth. You're moving all this dangerous goods, you need to be SCOSH approved. Oh my goodness, I can tell you it's a process on its own. I know, Richard, years ago, when I was still in industry, you used to be one of those only single people in the industry that did all these assessments. So colleagues, SCOSH audit requirement is one of the requirements if you have to start doing business with the chemical businesses. You want to move forward. Also, I think most of these organizations are becoming very critical and very stringent in terms of their requirements on how you get access to these businesses, especially with Sasol. So Richard, maybe you can just elaborate on that one. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. You're very, very correct, very right. Sasol are the most stringent. You cannot get into Sasol to load, even if you bought your product, your tanker, your vehicle can't get into Sasol unless you've been SQAS accredited. And the other oil majors, the Engens and the Astrons, etc., have got their own audit criteria if you want to work for them. But very often they will allow you in to start working for them based on an SQAS audit or a SCOSH audit. And then over time, you will then do their audit. So they see it as a good benchmark. And then they have other specific requirements, which may be over and above what the SQAS is. But Sasol are the big supporters of SQAS. Even if you're transporting low hazard products, Sasol produce polypropylene, which is plastic little prills. If you want to transport polypropylene for Sasol, you have to be SQAS accredited, and audited. So they use it as a basic benchmark, and the reason for it is that they have a cradle to grave philosophy. They manufacture the products. They want to ensure that those products go into the market, get transported, and get used in a responsible manner. So some companies, you pay for it, you load it at the gate, they don't worry about what happens to the product after it leaves their gate. Sasol do. They want to know within reasonable means that the product is being transported, loaded, transported, and offloaded in a responsible manner. So that's the SQAS. If there is enough interest, we can do a session on that. I'm an SQAS auditor, and I also do SQAS consulting. So I know the processes very well. So if there is some interest, we can look at that as one of the sessions.
Thank you, Richard. I think it will be very beneficial for most entrepreneurs. And when they want to go into this business, I've always advised that. And you being one of the auditors that is accredited, I think we must find ways of how we can work with yourself that from that accreditation perspective, from the audit perspective, that I think you can consult with some of the entrepreneurs and the businesses out there that goes into the market. But we can start with that session going forward. Thank you for that high level explanation.
Thank you. Right, let's continue. So this, you might say, well, this is all around safety. But as I said right at the beginning, safety is critical. So that's why I'm spending so much time on safety. Transportation and handling of gas cylinders. Do not allow cylinders to slide or come into contact with sharp edges. As I said earlier, if that vessel, that tank, that cylinder gets damaged and gets punctured, you're going to have a leak, and that's going to be can be catastrophic. Do not allow cylinders to overhang the side of transport vehicles. Again, if there's a side swipe or something like that, you bump into a wall, you're going to damage the cylinder. Do not drop cylinders or allow them to come into violent contact with each other or other hard objects. So with that picture of the industrial cylinders, they're all in those cages. They're all strapped into those cages so they don't rattle around and bump into each other. Do not load or offload cylinders by means of electromagnetic cranes or chain slings. So again, chain slings can slip, etc., etc. Make sure that if you are going to use mechanical means to lift them, that they are fail-safe. Electromagnetic cranes are not common, but if something fails and the magnet stops being a magnet and you drop a cage of cylinders, it's going to be a big problem. Allow combustible gas cylinders to be transported unless the valves are adequately protected. I mentioned to you earlier that the different ways of protecting the rings or the caps on top of the cylinders, make sure they're always in position. And under no circumstances drag, roll, or topple cylinders. I've seen cylinders being rolled off the back of a truck and landing on the ground. You really don't want to do that, because all you need is that cylinder to get damaged or that the valve to get knocked off, and then you've got the cylinder that's flying around. Some of the do's: ensure that the cylinders are properly secured during transport. We've said that a few times now. Transport cylinders properly secured in a vertical position with the valve uppermost. So even if you're transporting 1 or 2 cylinders on the back of a bakkie, make sure that they're in a vertical position and they are tied to the headboard of the bakkie to stop them moving around. Keep dirt, oil, and other foreign matter out of the valves and safety devices. And where possible, a special cylinder trolley or hand truck should be used when you're moving cylinders around. It's not that easy. They're very heavy and awkward, so you can hold them at 45 degrees and roll them on the ring at the bottom, but all you need is somebody to slip or to slip, and then you drop that on the ground and there could be a problem. So where possible, use a trolley. is again just a reiteration. It's all around safety when you're handling gas. Stench additive. You may, if you've ever used LPG, smelt, it's a very unpleasant smell. That is an additive that they put into the gas. As we say here, LPG is practically odorless and colorless, which makes it leak detection difficult. So like I said, you can't see it. And if they didn't put in the stench additive, you wouldn't be able to smell it. The small amount of stench additive, ethyl mesopotane, is added before the LPG goes to the market. So it's added as a safety precaution. So if there is a leak, you will smell it. You can't see it, but you'll be able to smell it. At least you know that there's a leak. So that's again a safety requirement or safety requirement. The additive is non-corrosive, non-toxic, and the odor can be smelt in very low concentrations of vapor. So yes, if you turn on your stove and you leave it for 5 seconds before you light it, you will smell that that odor comes through very quickly. So again, a safety precaution. So that's really the bulk of my presentation. And apologies, but it's all around safety. But I've got 2 videos. I'm not sure if they're going to work, but we need to see whether I can get these to work. Otherwise, I'll have to distribute them. No, I don't think this is going to work. That the video was of a truck carrying, was a LPG truck, which was in the town of Worcester in the Western Cape in 2019, about 2 years ago. But I don't know all the details, but the truck went into town. It was early in the morning. It was like 5:30 in the morning. Fortunately, it would appear that he turned down the wrong road and then decided to do a 3-point turn in the road. When he reversed back, he reversed into an electrical pole, which broke off one of the valves on the back of the tanker. With that, the gas started leaking. Didn't catch a light from the electrical pole. A man driving down the street innocently in his bakkie, going to work, drove through this gas cloud, which he couldn't see, and this ignited the gas. And you can see the remains of the tanker exploded. The top left picture is the remains of the tank. Wheels are blown off it completely. The bottom right picture is the remains of the truck that was pulling it, completely destroyed. The man was pulled out of his bakkie by a passerby. He had slight injuries, and miracle on miracles, there was nobody seriously injured in this incident. There were shops burnt, there was vehicles burnt, the truck, there was nothing left of the truck. But this is what can happen with LPG or any flammable gas, not just LPG. So unfortunately, I was concerned that the video wouldn't work, and it's not working. Maybe if I go off, just hold on a second. Let's see if this will work. No, sorry. I'll ask one of the clever IT people and see maybe we can share the videos with you. And I don't think this one's going to work either. This is a video on transport of cylinders. No, sorry, but we'll talk offline level and see what we can do, and then share them. But this is a video of a small truck similar to the one that I showed you earlier, with industrial cylinders on the back. Somewhere in the traffic ran into the back of another vehicle. Some of the cylinders fell off the vehicle, and the video is about 5 minutes long. And for 5 minutes, these cylinders are going all over the place. They're burning, they're exploding, they are shooting all over the road. So that just gives you again an example of what can happen and why those cylinders need to be correctly secured in the back of the vehicle with decent sides on the vehicle to prevent that that sort of thing happening. But yeah, I apologize for that, but I tried to do this over the weekend and didn't really have much of a chance to test it. But as I say, we'll try and share them at a later stage. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation. So yes, any questions, anything I can help anybody with? Again, there's my details. Please let me know, and I'll be happy to assist. Lebo?
All right, Richard, thank you so much, guys. Any questions from your side? I know it's very overwhelming. Looking at the response, it that this is the most intimidating industry. But I can assure you, the more we have all of these sessions and you get to learn about the industry, the more we simplifying the industry for you, but it doesn't take away that the industry as it is, from the safety perspective, is the first basic requirement if you really have to operate on it. But the more you are informed, the more you get to understand the industry. And it's very, very critical, especially in transportation. I think we are all aware that when you're talking about transportation risk, safety in terms of the products, that's what most clients are looking at as to how we move their products and how you're handling them on the road. And if there is an incident, how are you supposed to be handling that? And not just for you as a owner of the company or being in the logistics, but also for your truck driver that is there, that will be driving any of these tankers. Always remember that safety is very critical in this context. But Richard, I'm also very interested, and I'm looking at, I'm listening to myself talking about both ways. And when I'm talking about both ways, I'm speaking to, the converted, those that has been in logistics, probably being in the corporate or being in the trucking industry. I always say that in the movement of dangerous goods, there's other stakeholders that are involved. I mean, we spoke around the municipal bylaws as to where you will be moving. And I'm just thinking, like, if there's an incident already, you probably have hospitals coming through. What is it? The ambulances coming through. You have the police already coming through. My question is that in terms of the safety requirement and how they should be handling when they see a tanker, is the same level of knowledge really being sent through to any of the stakeholders?
Unfortunately, not. Some of the municipalities, Durban specifically, are very knowledgeable. They've got two refineries in their city. So they probably one of the most knowledgeable. But unfortunately, no, the knowledge in let's call it the emergency services is not as good as it should be. And from a policing point of view as well, I've done some training of the traffic officers on the N3, through the toll concession on the N3 route to Durban, paid for by the N3 toll concession. And a lot of those traffic officers from the different provinces, because the N3 goes through 4 different provinces. The last time they had any training on dangerous goods was when they were a traffic training college. So there's a huge vacuum out there, and it's really industry that are complying and assisting when there is a particular issue, or assisting the emergency services on how to deal with particular issues. So yeah, there's I wish we could do more training, but they are often of the opinion that they and I'm putting words into mouths now, they know what they're doing, and who are us as private enterprise to tell them how to run their show. So yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one.
Yeah, I guess a couple of years ago, I've seen an incident with explosives whereby some emergency services, especially on the police, that even if the driver was informed, then he knew what to do. They never listened to the driver. And there was a major explosion, I think on the route to Limpopo. You probably will know about that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the driver told those SAPS members not to go near the truck, and they refused. Yeah, so they had a duty to the driver. One driver was trapped in the vehicle. They were trying to save their driver. So yeah, what do they do? But yes, the driver tried to give them advice, and they didn't listen. But they also had a duty to try and save the trapped driver. So we're not here to judge, but yes, that is one of those incidents.
Okay, what I'm going to do, colleagues, I'm going to allow a question. There's a question that's coming from Tabona Butali from Botswana. I'm not sure if you are able to switch on your audio, Tabona, or I must just read through on the chat box. There's a question here from him saying that I am from Botswana. Are there any allocations reserved for foreign importers of LPG at Sasol, or will it be best to try to go through other distributors such as Wasaa? So that is the question. As you respond to that, Richard, I'm going to check on what is it, LinkedIn, to see if there's any other questions that are coming through there. Thank you.
The question from Botswana, thank you for that. As I mentioned earlier on in the discussion, I have a client in Zimbabwe, and I approached Sasol on their behalf to see if there was any special allocation for exports. And they came back to me very quickly and said there's no special allocation for exports. There is, in fact, no allocation for export. So again, if you want it, you're going to have to buy it through my client in Zimbabwe, buys it through a third party. I'm not sure who they are, but they buy it through the third party. Sasol know it's being exported. They've got no objection with it being exported because they've got to do a lot of the documentation. But there's no allocation specifically for exports.
All right. I'm not sure if there's other questions that are coming from those that have logged in on Zoom, but what is coming up on LinkedIn, some few comments here. Very informative session, and thank you. I would like to join the industry, but I don't know how, as I am in the different industry currently, but I managed to maintain an import and export certificate. So I think it's more on the growth and development perspective. There's also a question from Zelani who's saying that I'm in the upstream oil and gas industry. And I must say, because this topic looks at the the midstream portion, it makes it interesting to understand how the gas is transported. Is saying that too many barriers of entry, very high capital. That's what makes it very intimidating.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
Yes, what I would also want to comment for those that are students and you are in logistics, we have our student chapter, our youth chapter, where we are advising a lot of students in terms of entrepreneurship and workplace readiness programs. So please send a note to our email address. We will definitely just share it right now on the chat box. Please make sure that you get in touch with us because we are really advising in terms of career paths, or if you want to go into entrepreneurship as a youth out there. All right. And I'm speaking to yourself, Obakeng, and also Samuel. We have a lot of advice that we can give to yourself as a youth that wants to move into this industry. All right, I think there is another note from Harvey from Limpopo, Tsanin, how to put trucks on your company or trucks needed. Oh yes, Harvey, probably the question there specifically is you need a truck. Remember, you need a horse and you also have a tanker. So that's a link. You have to put that together. So you always need a truck, which we call a horse. and you will need a tanker separately. So you can just think of the investment that is needed about there, which you have to pay close to 2.5 million, 3 million for just the hose, and you still need to get a tanker from around 1.8 million, roughly, because there will always be additional safety requirements from a client, and it just increases the base money, the base amount in terms of the retail price.
Correct.
So, yeah. So guys, it's very, I understand where Richard is coming from. You're not just only investing. We always say trailers are normally cheaper than the horses, but in these instances, because of the safety requirements, there is more that is needed if you want to go into the trucking industry. Colleagues, any other questions? We are wrapping up now. Let me see. I don't see any other comments that are coming from LinkedIn, Richard, and no comments yet in terms of the of Zoom. I know it can be overwhelming, everyone, but listen, we are here to coach, we are here to mentor. That is why Richard is spending so much of his time really sharing his insight, his knowledge. We really need to grab whatever it is that is in his head, and Richard, we really appreciate that. I know that we won't be able to pick up each and every part of your brain to understand this industry, but this is very insightful. So guys, what we have already at a high level, if you remember the last 2 weeks when we were really talking about dangerous goods in general. So Richard spoke around the classification of dangerous goods, that it's classified from 1 to 9, and then gas itself is number 2. That is why when we're talking about 2.1, 2.2 in terms of flammable gases, non-flammable gases, and toxic gases, that's exactly what he was talking about. Secondly, he's spoken around LPG, LNG, CNG. He's spoken around the refineries that we have in our country. So if you are thinking of the industry like that, who are those companies? So he has shared insight around that. And then he's also shared how to move gas on road through the bulk tankers, the gas containers, the cylinders as well, from the mini bulk perspective. And what he said, as much as there's barriers of entry, you can start looking at smaller cylinders to understand the industry, just to build that capacity and also build up the industry. We spoke around SCASH as it is, from the safety and quality assessment and sustainability as a requirement in terms of the chemical businesses, most of these refineries, and we have emphasized that an organization like Sasol at this point in time, if you want to start moving their products, safety is very critical. It's a process that is really laboring, let me tell you that, but I will advise you that when you are in the industry, rather do that as well. And then, yeah, I think at a high level, that's what we have captured, Richard. I'm not sure, colleagues, if there's anything. Rose, can you please make sure that you share all the details on the chat box in terms of how everyone can connect with us. So everyone, we are speaking around transport sector on a weekly basis. We are live on Instagram. We have our sessions in terms of understanding transportation. We have the sessions with Richard every 2 weeks. And we have other engaging sessions again on supply chain. So we talk about supply chain, procurement, all the way to logistics. This is part of transportation that we are talking about. Richard, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for sharing your insight. We always appreciate that. And everyone, if you have any other questions over and above what Richard has shared with us, please send an email to ourselves. You will be getting a recording specifically from our side in terms of this session that we've just had with Richard. Thank you again to everyone that has connected. We're always looking forward to engaging with yourself. Follow us, Awiska, at Label the Supply Chain Coach on Instagram. All our live sessions are there. They are for free. We are there to help you guys. So please use this opportunity. Richard, any last words from your side?
No, Lebo, I don't think so. I think you've summed it up very well. And I think our next session is going to be on class 3 products, which is your liquids, fuels, mainly diesel, petrol, IP, all of those that we know very, very well. We use in our cars, but they also come with huge risks as well. So we'll next session will be about class 3 flammable liquids. Thank you.
Yeah. Class 3. I know a lot of you, when you have tankers, you're thinking that you want to just move fuel. So let's get to understand in detail then what fuel is and why everyone is gathering, pushing more in terms of fuel as an opportunity. So Richard, thank you so much. We will make sure that we share the information or any other questions that are coming afterwards with yourself. Thank you, everyone, for being a good audience. If you're still confused, you want to ask questions, please send them through to us. Thank you so much and wish you all a beautiful afternoon.
Thank you, Lebo. Bye-bye.
Good.
Bye.